Okay, if you guys remember in the previous line, or in the previous lines, Aeolus had let loose the winds, they had roused up a storm, and everything was threatening a certain death for the men. Uh, there is then a change of perspective, and you have extemplo. This is something like a temporal adverb, suddenly or on a sudden. Aeneai solvuntur frigore membra. Notice here your subject is membra. These are the subject of a passive verb, solvuntur, they are loosed by frigore. And then, of course, these are the membra aeneai. In Gemit, the subject, it's not expressed, but it's understood to be Aeneas. He lets out a cry. And then tendens, you've got your present active participle. Tendens, his duplicis palmas. Notice rather than saying simply his two palms, it's his double palms ad sidera. He says talia such things, or brings back such things with his woke. All right. And then you get his address. Notice that this is the poetic device apostrophe, where he is addressing people who have no chance of responding to him. It's more or less an address into the air. All right, the Romans use this quite frequently in poetry. All right, so he addresses "O terque quaterque beati," "O" 3 times and 4 times beati. Watch out for the use of quis here. You might think that this is the nominative singular interrogative pronoun, but it is actually a shortened form of quibus. And so this is definitely a long syllable here, quis, right? Quis ante ora patrum Troiae sub moenibus altis contingito Petrae. All right. Ante ora, this is like before the faces, or literally before the mouths, but before the faces of the patrum, right? Sub moenibus altis Troiae. All right, so take this phrase as being modified by that genitive under the altis. Notice again this use of altus. If you guys don't recognize altus on the AP exam, I'll be horribly disappointed. All right, remember vertical extent. And then contingit, this is typically used with a dative like quibus. So to whom it befell or happened to opetere, and you'll have to supply something like mortem here, right? To encounter or to meet death, right? Ante ora patrum sub moenibus altis Troiae. All right. And then another address, O dano fortissime gentis tudide. You have double genitive right here. So the fortissime, O fortissime tudide, right? And he's fortissime of the gentis, right? Of the Danaum. In case you've forgotten about the Danauns or the Danaoi, remember that Virgil is following Homeric convention here, and he never, well, I should say, Virgil will sometimes refer to the Greeks as Greeks, but Homer never did. He used a lot of these more localized names, okay? So you have the Danaoi, these are Greek people, the Achaeans and the Argives, and Homer uses these fairly indiscriminately. But note carefully, anytime you see one of those, that's going to be the Greeks, okay, taken as a whole. So even though the Argives, it refers specifically to a specific contingent of the Greeks, it's used for the Greeks more generally. Okay. And then Tudide, notice this is your vocative form. Tudides is this is a patronym, all right? Tydeus was the father of this guy Diomedes, whom you might know if you read either the Iliad or occasionally I think he's mentioned in passing in the Odyssey. So Diomedes was one of the great warriors of the Iliad. He was featured in a really prominent scene in Book 5 of the Iliad, in which he slaughters a guy named Pandarus, whom Aeneas was helping. So Aeneas and Pandarus come upon Diomedes, they fight against him, and then at one point, Diomedes thrusts his spear into Pandarus's face, and the spear pierces through it. It cuts his tongue at the neck, and I think it breaks out through the bottom of his chin, or some kind of gruesome description, of which there are many in the Iliad. Anyway, so Diomedes slaughters Pandarus, and then in order to prevent the same thing from happening to Aeneas, Aphrodite saves him, right? This is depicted actually right here. You see Aphrodite is rescuing Aeneas from the brutal spear of Diomedes. All right. Anyway, so he's addressing Diomedes, and then he asks with this sort of infinitive explanation, mene iliakis ocumbere campis non potuisse tua canimam hanc fundere dextra saevus ubi blah 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 blah. Note that parallels this exclamation that Juno made to herself earlier on with mene incepto desistere victa, right? So translate these as though you had some sort of finite verb, but here there's something more of an exclamatory past to it, right? Oh, that I, non potuisse, was not able to ocumbere, to fall on the Ilian fields, and to effundere hanc animam, to pour out this spirit with your, or by your dextra, your right hand, right? Notice that dextra is used a little bit elliptically there. And then ubi here is going to refer to those campis, right, on the plains where Saevus Hector, notice that Hector here is depicted as savage. In the Iliad, Hector had pressed the attack quite strongly and at one point almost got all the Trojans to the Greek ships to set them on fire. Hector was also the greatest of the Trojan warriors, so he perhaps warrants the epithet savage. Right? But where Hector, Jaket, and here you could maybe supply something like sub telo. Under the telum is in its initial sense something like a thrown or hurled weapon, but gradually becomes to be associated with any weapon together under the weapon of, or by the weapon of, Iacides. And Iacus was the grandfather of Achilles, and so even though Pelides, the son of Peleus, would be the proper patronym. The patronymic is extended, and so he's named after his grandfather rather than his father. And then you have again ubi, referring again to those campis, those fields of Troy that he remembers so well, where Ingen Sarpedon. This guy is actually just one of the he's a king of the Lycians, and they were one of the allies of the Trojans. He features fairly prominently in the Iliad. And then ubi tot simuis correpta subundis scuta virum, blah, 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 blah. Simuis here, this might not be obvious. This is your subject. The Simuis is a river not too far from Troy. The two big rivers here are the Scamander and the Simuis. Okay. So where the Simuis, Walwit, right, turns about, tot correpta sub undis scuta, and with virum here, note that you have a shortened form of virorum, right? This is actually a genitive plural. So it volvit the correpta scuta virorum sub undis, right? And the galeas, these are helmets, and the fortia corpora, right? So note that Aeneas is lamenting that he did not die a glorious death. This mirrors a lament frequently repeated in the Odyssey, in which both Odysseus and his son Telemachus lament at various points that he did not die at Troy and earn some sort of glory fighting in battle. Right? So it's a noble thing to die in battle. You earn a lot of glory. You acquit yourself bravely, very heroic and all of that. Yeah. But dying at sea was... that's just child's play. There's nothing great about that. Very inglorious way to go. This is one of the things Agamemnon laments in the underworld after he's been murdered by his wife, right? Would have been glorious if he had fallen under Hector or some other great Trojan warrior, but instead he came home after surviving all of this war just to be murdered by his wife. Okay, so the Greeks, and then by extension here the Trojans, are really worried about this sort of thing, falling prey to some sort of natural death that was not likely to bring them any sort of kleos or glory. All right, that should be it.